Well, I want them to say that I was irrepressible, and that I tend to come from joy, and that I'm somewhat fearless, and that I'm not afraid to be foolish or offend. I'm caring, I'm loving, but in some ways I think I'm more than that. I think I'm an artist, and that I'm somewhat fearless in that capacity, and I'm willing to take the lumps that come with that. I feel like an integration of everything I've done, where, you know, I don't pull punches. I say what I think, and I really show it fully. And my intention is to inspire and amaze and to encourage the same from others.
Before 16, had you had any inclinations as to what you would do or what you were drawn to? Or?
Well, my mom and dad got divorced when I was 4. And that really had a huge impact on me because I'd only see him during the summer times. He lived in Boston, and then he would come to St. Louis and work at the Mini Opera in the summer. I admired my dad. He was busy working, he was an artist, and when we would go out, he'd pick me up from my mom's house and we'd go do something for the weekend. And a lot of times it was either going fishing or on some river or lake or sketching. And so I wasn't very good at sketching. I was a young age, but I did want to identify with my dad, and you know, like it was this way of connecting. And you know, my dad is a little bit of an obsessive person, and so as a kid, you know, he wasn't just going like, oh yeah, what do you want to do, buddy? Let's just do what you want to do. It's more like, well, I'm going to do this. Here, you come along and do it with me. So in a way, I think my artistic proclivity was initially spurred by just wanting to be like my dad. And then I sort of took that desire all the way through becoming a journeyman set painter, and then realizing, you know what, I don't want to be like my dad.
What did your mom do?
She was a painter as well. She got a master's in painting, and actually her and my dad both went to Washington University in the art school. That's where they met, and that's also where I went, to Washington University in the art school in St. Louis.
What did you get from your mom?
She was human. She was not a sterile suburbanite. She wasn't this thing that fits into a modern culture very neatly. She had a great reverence for Native Americans and did a lot of work with Indians on reservations. What my mom gave me was that kind of more of a, I don't know, sort of a real human feeling. She just honored kind of sincere humanity rather than I have to look good for the people next door and I have to maintain appearances.
She still alive?
She is. She's in St. Louis. She still lives with my sister, who's developmentally disabled, Nicole, and that's a very dicey situation because Nicole is a kind of a loose cannon. She's 51, so she's 4 years younger than I am. Mm-hmm. So she was the fly in the ointment. She'd go into massive tirades, and she just made life not normal and pretty traumatic. And so my brother Jason and I, we just learned to cope with that sort of dysfunction. Differently abled siblings, or they're in their family, depending on the degree of disability, it hugely impacts the family. It is such a big deal. And you sort of feel like you don't fit in with the culture, because the culture is supposed to be perfect and everything's supposed to be just right, and you don't want anything inconvenient or to stick out or anything, right? And so when you have something in your life that sticks out and is not always pleasant, you might be in the middle of the grocery store and they have a big tirade, you develop kind of, I don't know, soul as a person. Yeah, everything isn't always pretty. Everything you got, like it's not always going to fit into a neat little box. In a lot of ways, that was another, my mom and dad getting divorced when I was 4, and then just living with my sister Nicole, a major sort of twister. It makes me more tolerant of other people. I was a clown at the Children's Hospital for 8 years, and so I learned how to be in all sorts of situations of dysfunction or function or grief or joy within that context as well. So I think that kind of my sister helped prep me for that job to some degree. And then even when I'm teaching as a teacher now, you've got all sorts of students on different levels of emotional, physical reality, and how do you have empathy and yet at the same time hold the agenda firm and have empathy and hold the agenda firm. You're not being a good teacher if you're just sort of letting people run roughshod. It's like it's a two-way street. And I think that's the gift that my sister's given me, is that everything's not just neat. At the end of it, I'm just like, I just needed some different perspective. And so I became a hippie, got a van, tricked it out, traveled the West for 7 months and wound up on Vashon Island, and then stumbled into, by accident, a performance company. And that's how my life tends to go. Like, I don't really go out and aggressively search for some sort of job or something. I always just sort of stumble into it, like by accident, and that's how I proceed. And then again, I was sort of on the job training where I didn't really identify as a performer, but all of a sudden I had to be. So I was learning all these modalities of performance that were unfamiliar. And so that was 5 years of that, and that kind of launched me into more of a performance career. I did solo performance and taught workshops on my own, started performing on my own. And then, I don't know how long after that, maybe 10 years after that, I formed a business called Chameleon Performance, which was my performance business. I did a lot of corporate characters and MC work, roving, ambiance, and I still do that. The thing about the Grinch, well, in the story, right, what's at the heart of the Grinch? A big heart, right? People sense that when you do the Grinch that really it's love that's coming out. And whenever I do any sort of performance, that's really what it's about. I do everything out of benevolence. I call it buffoon benevolence. So in terms of the Grinch, very buffoon in terms of unapologetic and not afraid to be ugly. And the beauty of that. All of the Umo people agree. It was doing the buffoon work that made us really good performers. So if you're an acrobat, okay, but you can't do a handstand, then you're not a very good acrobat because you can't reverse your balance. If you can reverse your balance, then that means you have a 360-degree kind of potential, right? Now as an actor, if you're afraid to go to the dark side and play with that, because that's half of life, if you don't feel comfortable with that, then you're half an actor. You don't know how to work with the full potential of human experience. And when you can embrace that in totality, which buffoon work really sends that point home, then you become a very powerful performer because you're unafraid and you know the value of darkness and how to use it in a way that's relatable. The point is to tread on the edge and kind of create that sense of danger and delight. What I've always found is that something arrives when I'm in that moment. And like, I tend to hit the nail on the head and like really hit it. And it's always endlessly astounding to me because like I was a shy kid who could barely say things on stage. I guess if your question is what is the spark of inspiration for any project that I do, I would say that it comes down to a philosophical / sort of emotional core, like a crystalline thing that won't go away. And each one is very different. Like I'm really kind of all over the map with what I do, not just in terms of the tone, but in terms of the media and everything. But at the core of each modality is a specific kind of truth that I feel. It's a truth for me. I don't expect it to be a truth for anybody else, but it's something that I feel is a truth that is worthy of holding my attention for a long time. So when I'm not working for money, I especially need that. I mean, I can put on motivations onto like, oh, I'm supposed to go do a performance gig, and then my motivation is to do a good job, and then of course I really like performing in front of people, and I think that just connecting with people and being a mythic character within the mundane pedestrian area is profound unto itself. So I do have a core of meaning that makes it powerful for me and for the people. For instance, when I did this thing for the VCA, these 4 large paintings that were kind of apocalyptic in nature, the show was called Fear and Inspiration, and it had biblical sort of themes. You know, it had Jesus at the wheel, it had Eve with the tree growing out of her head and holding a giant apple. It had a horse on fire, and it had a person drawing a smiley face on a notepad surrounded by catastrophe, atomic bombs going off, death at his shoulder, missile going off, you know, it was just chaos all around. And so for me, I had these images in unformed ways in my mind, because I feel like those paintings are of the time we are in right now, that there's apocalyptical transition. And to me, all of those are dying paradigms. And I think that we need to shift beyond them. And so they wouldn't go away. And the thing is, I was making money doing landscape paintings. As of that show, I stopped making money on paintings. But it was more important to me to do these paintings and to spend $1,500 on really fancy frames and to put them up and sort of legitimize these images, because it was a burr under my saddle. It's something I just kind of had to do. Now, in terms of the landscape paintings, very different agenda. The agenda wasn't to be like, oh, I want to be an artist who can paint well, and people think that, and sell paintings. That wasn't the agenda. The agenda was that I want to commune with nature. That was the core of it. So it was a very different motivation that I had with the previous show I just talked about. And so that was me going to places, setting up, and looking at a spot for 4 hours. And the light changing, animals going by, people going by, things happening. I'm creating this, I'm interacting with, I'm having to look at this thing for the 100th time and seeing it in a different way, and then, you know, and then put it together, and then I have this kind of like sealed memory of an experience, a place, and something that I can share with someone else. So it had a very different motivation, but still nonetheless just as profound to me, that there is some impetus that I feel is really important, and it has to do usually with bringing meaning to my life and trying to share that with the world. I'm not a pure like, oh, I studied at Jacques Lecoq's School of Clowning, and you know, I never did that. And to be honest, I haven't done a lot of training like that. I've kind of always got it kind of on the job. So in some ways, my skills are illicitly gotten. I only have a BFA, I don't have a master's, and I'm teaching at a college. My dad was a tenured professor at Brandeis University, and he didn't even have an undergraduate degree, but he was at the top of his field in terms of being a scenic artist. And so they had to fly people all over the country in order to okay him to become a tenured professor at a pretty prestigious university, Brandeis University. That was kind of a coup. So I think I sort of hold that kind of same sensibility as my father. It's like, we're just good and we don't need a degree, though I do have a BFA. The interesting thing about sort of learning as you go is that you develop more empathy with the students, because you're not just being this high on the pedestal expert that is kind of laying down the law. And so I developed my curriculum, my class plans, from the ground level up, seeing what worked and what didn't. And then you get to this level where you're starting to understand what it means to teach, that it's not about students being good, it's about taking them from where they're at. Lately, I don't know, I'm starting to feel when I'm teaching, it's like I'm doing a lead guitar solo. I'm just riffing. I'm really able to give feedback very quickly, very confidently. I'm good at leading a classroom. They really respect my expertise even though I was never in the digital industry, I was never in gaming or animation, I was really outside of this world. So it's taken a long time for me to go, yes, I'm really good at giving feedback on this stuff. I really know my way around visually. I'm good at giving information that is critical and uplifting at the same time. I'm extremely fortunate to be working with young people at the beginning of their lives, where they are learning a skill that I can purvey to them that I learned in college. So it's a deja vu thing. I get all this energy from them. I learn a ton from them. If you consider it a two-way street in terms of learning, that's really when it's working, because it should be a mutual discovery with teacher and student. And also respecting students. Like, I know a freshman coming in who doesn't know anything is going to pretty soon be equal or better than my skill in a lot of ways, especially in the digital realm, in very little time. And so you have to respect them as peers. And even when I fail students, which I do, usually it's always a good relationship, because they know I have their best interest in mind. That's really my bottom line, is like, I want them to actually have the skills. I just try to nurture that thing of respecting students, respecting them as human beings, honoring their creativity and mine, and then also, you know, I'm a performer, and I use that in class. I'm probably one of your weirder teachers there. I always have an upper hand on students, because nobody can out-weird me. Like, nobody. It doesn't matter who you are. And I don't lord that over them. It's just that I'm so used to being able to be the center of attention, and I'm not afraid to look foolish. And that's a superpower. If you're not afraid to look foolish, I mean, it's hard to mess with you. I respect them, and I respect myself, and I try to run an entertaining class. So,
How did you get into this position of not being a teacher, but you're teaching?
So, I was working with Zambini Brothers, which is a giant puppetry performance group. Bill Jarko was the lead of it, and he was also teaching a course called Acting for Animation at DigiPen. He set up this course, but an adjunct could only teach 3 courses at once, and so there were 6 courses. He needed someone else, so he asked me. I went in and started teaching this course. And so I started teaching acting, and I was good at it. And it was an expiring course. You're directing bunches of pieces every single class time. And you're taking students who have never performed, almost all of them, who are terrified of performing, and you're having them perform, and you're seeing how they can have success doing it. So that's how I started. Then they found out I could draw, and they needed another drawing teacher. So they just threw me in these low-level kind of like continuing education drawing courses. And then they found out that I was pretty good at teaching it. And then I just evolved into being the main drawing teacher for the freshman cohort, revamping that and then inventing a new second semester course. And then I became a full-time faculty. The weird thing about that was Jim Johnson, who had been the department chair for the BFA, who had hired me, and who had been the main person to get me the full-time position, died just a few months later. And while he was really having a hard time physically, he was pushing my full-time application through. It was sort of a dramatic way to become a full-time faculty.
What was it like to have someone like Jim Johnson have that strong faith in you?
It was great. I mean, I'd been a low self-esteem contractor for decades. Never, ever, ever sticking with one thing. I had to do this job, I had to do this, I had to do that. So I never had a chance to get really self-esteem. And so I come into an institution where you consistently repeat what you did before, and you get better at it. And I was acknowledged for that, and I was getting better at it. And it was in the milieu of, oh, you're supposed to be from the industry, or you're from the gaming industry, or for the animation industry, or you're supposed to have some. And I had zero of that background. I was just theater, scenery. That was me, right? And so I felt insecure about it. I felt it, and to have that acknowledgement, and then also realizing that all these years of being a contractor, of never doing the same thing, it actually gave me a huge advantage over a lot of people, because a lot of people are just used to being specialists, and they're also used to working within hierarchies. And with me, I was used to having to make decisions and invent things on the fly all the time. I had to look at a new thing that I didn't know what to do, say, oh, what are the important points? Okay, how do I fake it to make it work so that I can get paid? And that sort of skill set, that ability, really worked well in DigiPen, because DigiPen, no one was really monitoring stuff. People were afraid of management, and I was more like, oh, I am going to just come from inspiration, I'm going to come from my skill set, and I'm going to make this place better. And when I said that, it felt egotistical and pretentious. As it turns out, it was actually true. I mean, I've had a big impact on this institution. And I think part of it is because I do come from outside of the context of that world. And there's something to that. And I also leverage naivete well. And I think that's what being a contractor taught me. You can use naivete to your advantage, and it can be even in a legitimate way. You're not just a huckster. It allows you to see the perspective of the beginner and to try to, if you're a beginner with them, to try to come along together. Well, I want them to say that I was irrepressible, and that I tend to come from joy, and that I'm somewhat fearless, and that I'm not afraid to be foolish or offend. I'm caring, I'm loving, but in some ways I think I'm more than that. I think I'm an artist, and that I'm somewhat fearless in that capacity, and I'm willing to take the lumps that come with that. I feel like an integration of everything I've done, where, you know, I don't pull punches. I say what I think, and I really show it fully. And my intention is to inspire and amaze and to encourage the same from others. That there is some impetus that I feel is really important, and it has to do usually with bringing meaning to my life and trying to share that with the world.